You've probably seen the picture. The classic caveman, hunched over, thick brow, maybe dragging a club. He's all muscle and hair. This is our popular image of a Neanderthal, and the one thing everyone seems to agree on is that he was strong. Super strong. Stronger than us. But is that true, or is it just part of the caricature? The short answer is yes. The evidence is pretty clear that Neanderthals were, on average, physically stronger than modern humans. But the real story is a lot more interesting than just that. It's not about them being brutish superheroes and us being the clever, weaker species that won out. It's about two different ways of being human, two different strategies for survival written into our very bones. To understand their strength, we have to look at how they were built, why they were built that way, and what trade-offs came with that immense power. Our main window into the Neanderthal world is their skeletons, and their bones tell a powerful story. When a paleoanthropologist looks at a Neanderthal skeleton next to a modern human one, the difference is immediate. It's like parking a heavy-duty pickup truck next to a sedan. They're both vehicles, they both work, but one is clearly built for a tougher, more demanding job. The first thing you'd notice is the sheer thickness of the bones. Neanderthal bones were robust. The walls of their long bones, like the femur in the leg or the humerus in the arm, were much thicker than ours. The bones themselves were denser. This isn't just a random trait. Bone is living tissue. It responds to stress. When you lift weights regularly, your bones get denser to handle the load. The extreme robusticity of Neanderthal bones tells us that they were living under constant high levels of physical stress starting from a young age. Their entire life was a workout. Their skeletons were permanently adapted for a world of strain and force. Then you look at where the muscles attach to those bones. Muscles don't just float in place. They connect to the skeleton with tendons, and where a powerful muscle repeatedly pulls on a bone, it leaves a mark. These marks are called muscle attachments or entheses. On a modern human skeleton, these are relatively smooth ridges and bumps. On a Neanderthal skeleton, they are massive, rugged crests and flanges of bone. Think of it like this. If you want to anchor a thin rope to a wall, a small screw will do. If you want to anchor a thick, heavy steel cable, you need a huge, heavy-duty anchor bolt sunk deep into the structure. Neanderthal muscle attachments were the heavy-duty anchor bolts. The size of these attachment points directly implies that the muscles pulling on them were bigger and more powerful than ours. Their pectoral muscles, the ones in their chest, had huge anchor points on the humerus. This suggests incredible pulling and squeezing strength. Their deltoids and their shoulders were massive. Their quads, their biceps, all of it. The skeletal evidence points to a body packed with more muscle mass, generating more force. And let's get more specific. Take their chest. A modern human rib cage is relatively flat front to back and wide side to side. A Neanderthal rib cage was enormous. It was wide, but it also had a huge volume from front to back. It's often described as barrel-shaped. For a long time, scientists thought this meant they had massive lungs, allowing them to take in huge gulps of air in the cold, oxygen-thin climates of the Ice Age. That's probably part of the story, but a big, stable torso is also the foundation of all strength. Power comes from the core. This huge, solid, thoracic structure would have provided an incredibly stable platform for their powerful arms and shoulders to operate from. It was a power block at the center of their body. Now look at their limbs. Neanderthals were generally shorter and stockier than most modern humans. Their arms and legs were particularly short in the lower segments. That is, their forearms were short compared to their upper arms, and their lower legs were short compared to their upper legs. This body plan, short and wide with shorter extremities, is a classic adaptation to a cold climate. It reduces the amount of surface area relative to body volume, which helps conserve heat. A sphere is the most efficient shape for retaining heat, and a Neanderthal body was built closer to that principle than our lanky, modern builds, which are better for dissipating heat. But these short limbs had another effect. They changed the physics of their movement. Longer limbs are like long levers. They are very efficient for locomotion, especially for running. You get more distance with each stride. Shorter, thicker limbs are less efficient for running, but they are incredibly powerful. They create immense leverage for short, forceful movements. Think of a powerlifter. They are often built with shorter limbs because it gives them a mechanical advantage in lifting huge weights over a short distance. A Neanderthal's build wasn't for marathon running, it was for generating explosive force in close quarters. Their shoulders were a masterpiece of power engineering. The Neanderthal shoulder blade, the scapula, was very wide. The joint itself, where the arm connects to the shoulder, was positioned more forward on the body. Biomechanical studies suggest this arrangement would have given their arms incredible power in movements like stabbing downwards or sideways. It wasn't a shoulder built for an efficient overhand throw like a modern baseball pitcher's. In fact, they may have been quite bad at that motion, but for a close quarters underhand thrust with a spear, or for grappling with a large animal, it was a devastatingly powerful design. Even their hands were different. Neanderthal finger bones were thick and robust. The tips of their fingers were extremely broad, much broader than ours. This suggests a grip of incredible power. It was likely a squeeze grip or a power grip. Imagine holding a thick stone tool or the shaft of a heavy spear. Their hands were built to clamp down with crushing force and not let go. What they might have lacked was our delicate precision grip, the ability to bring the tip of the thumb and forefinger together with fine motor control. Our hands are great for manipulating small objects, for sewing, for creating delicate art. Their hands were tools of power, built to hold on for dear life and exert maximum force. So the bones paint a clear picture. Thicker skeleton, bigger muscle attachments, a barrel chest, shorter power lever limbs, and a crushing grip. This was a body built for strength. But why? Evolution doesn't do things for no reason. Strength is expensive. Muscle requires a huge amount of calories to build and maintain. You don't evolve a body like that unless you absolutely need it. The reason for their strength lies in the world they inhabited and the way they survived in it. The Neanderthals lived during the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. It was a brutal, unforgiving world. The landscape was full of dangerous animals. Not just deer and horses, but woolly rhinos, giant cave bears, and mammoths. These were the animals Neanderthals had to hunt to survive. And here's the crucial part: they didn't have bows and arrows. At least, we have no convincing evidence they did. Projectile weapon technology, things that allow you to kill from a safe distance, seems to be an invention of modern humans, Homo sapiens. Neanderthal weapons were different. Their primary tool was a stone-tipped spear. But these weren't light, throwing javelins. They were heavy, robust spears. The evidence suggests they were used as thrusting weapons. This completely changes the nature of the hunt. It means that to kill a large animal, a Neanderthal had to get close. Dangerously close. Imagine what that means. It's not about standing back and launching a volley of arrows. It's about a group of hunters surrounding a giant, powerful animal, an Ice Age bison or a wild horse, and physically driving a spear into it. This is a full contact, life or death struggle. The animal is fighting back. It's kicking, goring, and trampling. The hunt becomes a wrestling match. You need incredible upper body and core strength to drive that spear deep enough to be lethal. You need a powerful, stable base to absorb the impact of a struggling animal. You need a grip that won't fail. This theory is supported by the pattern of injuries we find on Neanderthal skeletons. Many Neanderthal fossils show evidence of healed fractures and severe trauma. The researchers analyzed these injury patterns and found something remarkable. The types and locations of the injuries, burst broken arms, ribs, head and neck trauma, were strikingly similar to the injuries seen in one specific group of modern humans, professional rodeo riders. These are people who regularly get thrown around by large, powerful animals. The parallel suggests that Neanderthal life involved regular, violent, close-quarters encounters with big game. Their strength wasn't a luxury, it was a prerequisite for survival. It was the armor and the weapon they needed to eat. Their daily life beyond the hunt was also physically demanding. They didn't have beasts of burden. Anything that needed to be moved was moved by muscle power. They carried heavy loads of meat back to their shelters. They dragged wood for fires. They worked animal hides to make clothing and shelter, a process that requires a lot of upper body strength for scraping and stretching. Their entire existence was a manual, physical grind. Their robust bodies were the product of this lifestyle shaped by generations of natural selection that favored individuals strong enough and tough enough to endure it. So, how much stronger were they? This is a hard question to answer precisely. We can't put a Neanderthal on a weight machine, but scientists can create biomechanical models based on their skeletons. By analyzing the bones, the leverage of the joints, and the size of the muscle attachments, they can estimate the force their muscles could generate. The estimates vary, but most researchers agree they were significantly stronger than the average modern human. Some studies suggest their arms could generate 20 to 30% more force in pulling and squeezing motions. Their grip strength was likely immense, perhaps double that of an average person today. They weren't just a little bit stronger, it was a noticeable functional difference. However, it's important not to exaggerate this. They weren't comic book characters capable of lifting cars. The difference was likely comparable to the difference between a modern office worker and a professional athlete, like a powerlifter or a stonemason who has spent their life engaged in heavy physical labor. But in the Neanderthal world, everyone was a professional athlete. Their baseline was simply higher than our baseline. Their strength was a specialization, just like a cheetah's speed or a polar bear's tolerance for cold. It was the central tool in their survival kit. But this is where the story gets more complex. Because for every evolutionary adaptation, there is a trade-off. Their strength-based strategy came at a cost. And to understand their story, we have to look at what they gave up, and what we, Homo sapiens, were good at instead. This isn't a story of the strong versus the weak. It's a story of the powerlifter versus the marathon runner. Neanderthals were built for power. We were built for endurance. Look at our bodies. We are generally taller and more slender, with longer limbs. Our long legs, combined with our springy Achilles tendons and our unique foot arches, make us phenomenal long-distance runners. Our ability to sweat from millions of glands all over our bodies is a super-powered cooling system that allows us to run for hours in the heat without overheating. This suggests we specialize in a different kind of hunting persistence hunting. Instead of overpowering an animal in a short, violent burst, our ancestors could have run it to exhaustion. They could track an animal for miles and miles under the hot sun, jogging along at a steady pace until the animal, covered in fur and unable to cool itself effectively, collapsed from heat stroke. This is a different kind of strength. It's metabolic strength, it's endurance. A stocky, heavily muscled Neanderthal would have overheated quickly. Their build was fantastic for conserving heat in the cold, but terrible for getting rid of it during prolonged exertion. They were sprinters, not marathoners. Then there's the issue of efficiency. That big, muscular body of a Neanderthal was a gas guzzler. It required a huge number of calories just to maintain. Some estimates suggest a Neanderthal might have needed 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day, or even more in the cold winters. This meant they had to be incredibly successful hunters all the time. If the game disappeared for a few weeks, their high-energy bodies would face a crisis faster than a more lightly built Homo sapiens would. Our slender build is more fuel efficient. We can survive on less. In a world of fluctuating resources, a lower metabolic cost is a huge advantage. And let's go back to the shoulder. The Neanderthal shoulder was powerful for thrusting. The modern human shoulder is different. It's looser, more flexible, it's perfectly adapted for a high-speed overhand throw. This is our secret weapon. The ability to throw a rock or a sharpened stick accurately and with lethal force is a game changer. It allows you to hunt from a distance, it reduces the risk of getting gored or trampled. It's safer and more energy efficient. While a Neanderthal was wrestling a giant deer up close, a group of Homo sapiens could stand back and bring down the same animal with a volley of thrown spears. This ability to kill at a distance is likely linked to the development of more complex projectile weapons, like the atlatl, a spear thrower, and eventually the bow and arrow. These technologies were force multipliers. They allowed our less muscular bodies to generate lethal energy from a safe distance. Our strength was not in our muscles, but in our technology and our biomechanics. So we have two different models for success. The Neanderthal model was based on robusticity, raw power, and close quarters dominance. It was an incredibly successful strategy. They thrived across Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years through multiple ice ages. They were not failures, they were masters of their environment. The Homo sapiens model was based on efficiency, endurance, and range technology. We were the lighter, more economical model. We weren't as strong in a one-on-one fight, but we could cover more ground, survive on less food, and kill more safely. When modern humans expanded out of Africa and into Neanderthal territory in Europe, these two strategies came into direct competition. For a long time, the old story was that the brainy weaklings, outsmarted the dumb brutes. That's wrong. Neanderthals had brains just as large as ours, sometimes larger. They made sophisticated tools, they controlled fire, they buried their dead, and they likely had some form of language. They were not stupid. Their disappearance was probably the result of a complex mix of factors. The climate was changing rapidly, which may have disrupted the large herds they depended on. Maybe modern humans, with our more efficient bodies and ranged weapons, were able to exploit a wider variety of resources. Perhaps we simply had higher birth rates and our larger, more interconnected social groups could outcompete smaller, more isolated Neanderthal populations. Their strength, their greatest adaptation, may have ultimately become a liability. A body built for power is not flexible. It is specialized for a certain way of life. When that way of life disappears, the specialization becomes a weakness. Their high-calorie needs would have made them more vulnerable to starvation during lean times. Their strategy of close-quarters hunting, while effective, was also incredibly risky, leading to high rates of injury and death among prime-age adults. A modern human hunter who got injured could still be a valuable member of the group, perhaps making tools or teaching children. A Neanderthal hunter with a shattered leg was in a much more precarious position. So yes, Neanderthals were stronger than us. Their bodies were magnificent machines of power, perfectly sculpted by evolution for a life of intense physical confrontation in a harsh world. To look at their skeletons is to see a testament to that strength, but it's not the whole story. Our own species, with its lighter frame, its endurance-built legs, and its throwing-adapted shoulder, represents a different kind of physical prowess. We traded brute force for efficiency. We traded raw power for ranged projection. The story of Neanderthal strength isn't just a fun fact. It's a profound lesson in evolution. It shows that there is no single perfect way to be. Strength and weakness are relative terms, defined by the challenges of the environment. The Neanderthals were incredibly strong, and that strength made them successful for an immense period of time. But when the world changed, another kind of strength, the strength of efficiency, of endurance, and of innovation, proved to be the better long-term strategy. They were the powerlifters of the human family. We were the marathon runners. And in the long race of evolution, it was the marathon runner that crossed the finish line.